Welcome to The Art of Likeability, ranked one of the top podcasts in the world. In this podcast, you'll discover how to leverage likability to build stronger relationships, lead more efficiently, close more sales, and keep customers happy while increasing success in your professional and personal life. Let's jump in with your host, Arel Moody.
What's going on, Art of Likeability family? Arel Moody here, your host, with the most likability knowledge on the internet, here to give you information, whether it's in this accent or whether it's in my normal speaking voice. But I'm excited to share information with you that helps you build your social skills, helps you become more confident, have more charisma, be more likable, like other people more because you can interact better with them, have them like you more because you know how to be so socially masterful, like yourself more, and like the creator and all of the creations more, because that sounds like a pretty good life to me. What do you think? And that's what we're here for. And I want to share something with you that's important, specifically about social skills. This particular episode, this podcast episode of The Art of Likeability, will show you a really cool strategy when you're meeting people. Now, a lot of people hate meeting people. They hate the small talk. They hate walking into the room. They hate dealing. You ever see a bunch of people actually when they walk into a room, they don't know what to do. A lot of people pull their phones out nowadays. It's actually kind of interesting. Back in the day, we didn't have phones, right? So people would just stand up by the wall. Maybe they would go get a drink. They'd look down at the drink. They'd swish the drink around. They'd take the straw out, put the straw back in. But now we got phones, so we can be like, I'm at this lame event. I don't know if I like anybody here. Sad face emoticon. Hashtag wallflower. You shouldn't be using hashtag. It's 2017, people. Seriously. But, whatever. So, now we have phones. We can jump on it, so we don't have to engage with people. But I want you to remember something. This is very important about social settings. And I didn't get this for so long. Honestly, I was so nervous. I would have this anxiety build up. I would go to every room and immediately start scanning the room for just somewhat of a familiar face so I can beeline over to them and be like, oh my gosh, how are you? Let me only cling to you and pray that you can introduce me to someone who is cool, because I am so scared and nervous right now. That's how I would feel. I would just hate it. I would hate it. I would feel like people were judging me. I would feel like I wasn't cool enough. I'd feel like I wasn't saying things. I have no idea, okay, how do I slip myself into a conversation? How do I start talking with someone? I don't know what to do. What do I do? So I want to give you some strategies around that. I'm actually going to be coming out with something too that's a little bit more in depth with this, because it's so important you can build this skill set, right? Because if you think about it, if you can walk into any business event, whether it's a corporate party, whether it's a networking event, whether it's a conference, whether it's a social networking event, whether it's a birthday party, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, whatever it is, right? As long as you can walk in and know you're always going to rock it, it turns it into a different experience, and it turns your ability to interact with people and build relationships that may benefit your life tremendously. When you become more socially affluent, and people like interacting with you, have a good first impression, maybe business opportunities come your way. Maybe if you're single, you get introduced to the person of your dreams. There's a lot of benefit. A lot of contracts get made through, kind of the art of the handshake, if you will. So I just want you to remember, building these skills are very important, not just for your personal life, but for your social life and for your professional life. So what I want you to do is, when you go into any room, I want you to remember every single person there feels exactly the way I just described, not just you. This is seriously, there are a lot of people who are really good at faking, but most people, especially people who don't listen to this podcast, right? And maybe there's 1% of the world that is totally different than that, right? But most people, the social anxiety is high. The pressure is high. They're not sure what they want to do. So I encourage you to realize you're not alone. But there are strategies, there are things you can do that can help you become way more socially adept. And the first thing is understanding everyone's in the same boat. The second thing is I want you to have a interesting story, okay? Now, the story is something you can talk about because everyone is always going to ask a question. If you ever engage in a conversation, they're going to ask, how are you? What do you do? What's new? Like, these are the stories, the questions that people just always ask. Like, most people aren't original. They're not going to ask the questions we teach here at the Art of Likeability, which teaches you how to like ask questions and how to start questions differently so that people engage much more differently with you. Everyone else, they ask just same old, what do you do? What's new? How are you? How you feeling? What's up? That's what everyone says, right? Typically. So you want to have a really interesting story at all times. So here's what I encourage you to do. Right now, kind of look at your life and ask yourself, what is something kind of new or exciting that's generally accepted? Okay, now this is important. Let's say, for example, you are an IT professional and you just figured out, I don't even know if this is a real thing, I'm making this up, right? Just like you figure out this really complex thing you can do with information technology frameworking of some sort. It's just something only people in IT would know. I'm clearly not in IT, so I don't even know how to give you a good example of it. But the idea is something that's very industry specific, right? Like if I would just share with you, oh man, there's some really great things happening with the C++ and the JavaScript and the Ruby on Rails that's really changing the game, the way iframes are being HTML. I don't even know what I just said right now. Hopefully it made sense, right? But if it didn't, then don't talk about that. Like that's not going to be something that people care about, right? Typically what's interesting to people is anything that is socially popular. So like for example, the NBA finals happened, the NHL finals happened. You know, asking people like, oh man, what'd you think about the game? Always is a great way to start. So you can start with a story about why you like LeBron James or why you hate LeBron James. And let me show you how that might play out. So we walk into a situation, someone starts chatting me up and they go, hey, Arel, how are you? I'm like, man, I'm doing great. I'm real happy. Cavs made it to the finals. I mean, they lost the finals, but, you know, Cavs made it to the finals. You know, I'm a big LeBron fan. Really excited about it. You know, I know it's kind of weird to start with basketball. I'm just really excited about basketball. I remember, you know, I always wanted to play basketball when I was in high school, but I never made the team. But I was always a fan of the sport and really a fan of hard work. And, you know, seeing where this dude's going right now, it's actually kind of cool. So it's my little kind of geeky thing, right? So this is the important part of the story I want you to acknowledge, right? I mentioned a bunch of things in that story that will allow people to follow up and ask questions if they so choose, right? Most people will. So in that story, I let you know that in high school, I wanted to make the basketball team, but I never did. So that might open up the door for someone to say, oh, if you didn't play basketball in high school, what did you do in high school, right? The second thing it can open up is that like, oh, I really like the Cavs or LeBron James or whatever the case is, right? That might open up, they hate LeBron James, and that's like a fun battle. Or they might like LeBron James too. So it opened up to talk more about basketball as well. And then, you kind of talk about like the game of it a little bit. It opens up a lot of doors. So what you did is very subtly, by telling a story, and the story I told was how I didn't make the team. It's a quick story. It's not like I'm not telling you to come up with a play. It's a quick story about how I didn't make the basketball team in high school, but I've always loved the sport. I love the work ethic, and I really just, got involved in watching it, and I just really enjoy it. So, it's just a little thing I do. And now the key, no matter what you say, right? If it sounds a little geeky, which like I just went a little like basketball geeky, just say, I know it sounds geeky, but it's my thing. It actually makes almost anything you say acceptable, because it makes you human. So for example, let's say you were talking about like, oh man, I just figured out, how to do this 15,000 word essay, and I couldn't get it to 15,000. I was stuck at 11 and I figured out this strategy. I know this is a little geeky, but I got really excited about it. What you'll actually find is most people can relate to anything that's geeky. Now, the thing I'm geeky about may not be the thing you're geeky about, But we all, every human, every adult, maybe not every high school student, a lot of people were so burnt by high school and trying to be cool that they think that that still applies as an adult. It doesn't, right? So, and even in high school, it really doesn't apply. We act like it applies, but it doesn't, right? But when you say, I know it sounds a little geeky or I just nerd out on this kind of stuff, it's just letting people know you're human. So it actually gives you permission to talk about almost anything you want. So if you have nothing in your, like if you're like, but Aurel, I don't pay attention to current events. I don't know what's happening in the sports world or whatever. You could still talk about that thing that's really specific, but you have to make it generally understood. So if I'm talking about like I'm writing a really cool thing and I couldn't get it past 15,000 words, I was stuck at 11,000. Then I learned this writing thing that got me over it. So I'm really excited about it. I know it's my kind of geeky, nerdy thing about writing, but I'm pumped about it. By telling that kind of story, even though it's not necessarily a generally accepted thing, it opens up the door for people to ask questions like, well, what are you writing about? What was the technique that you applied? Tell me more about this. It gives people the opportunity for them to pull and ask you questions. And they get to become the star. And they get to tell, they ask you, and then whatever they ask you, you can put it back on them. Oh, you know a little bit about writing. I can tell by the questions you're asking me. Do you write? And they can say, oh, no, I don't write. Or they'll be like, yeah, I do write a little bit, but, I don't share with them. It opens up the door. So you want to kind of get clear on what's a story that you can tell in your answer to how are you doing, what's going on when you first meet someone, that creates multiple footholds for people to ask you questions about more clarity and detail, and that allow you to then kind of put it back onto them. So let's do a couple more examples so we can make it a little bit more real, right? So let's say I'm walking up to someone and I'm at the event and I'm all nervous. I got to realize everyone's nervous. So if I can give them, toss them a bone, if you will, and make it a little bit easier for them, I'm helping them out a lot too. And I do that by creating a little bit of a story. So let's say I'm someone that really is into dogs, okay? So I love dogs, which is true. I love dogs, right? And someone says, hey, how you doing? I'm going to be like, oh, man, I'm so excited. I'm really, I know this is a little geeky, so just bear with me, right? So you can do it in the front or the back end. It really doesn't matter. If it's really geeky, you do it in the front end. I'd be like, man, I'm really into dogs, and I just found out about sugar gliders. Now, I know sugar gliders are not dogs. Do you even know what a sugar glider is? And they'll go, oh, no, I never heard of a sugar glider. But like, oh, man, it's actually like a marsupial, like a kangaroo, but they're like house pets. So it's like you can have a kangaroo house pet, but it fits in your pocket. And it blew my mind. I know this is a little geeky. I just love dogs. I love house pets. And this isn't a dog, but it's kind of like a cool dog. And I just been really, really excited about it. Now, imagine if I said that to you. What's going to be some natural questions that easily come out of that? Oh, let me see a picture of the sugar glider. This is a real thing, by the way. They're going to say, wait, it's a marsupial, not a dog? What do you mean? Does it look like a kangaroo? And you can say, no, let me break it down. And then if you know stuff about it, you can kind of explain it. It actually gets the conversation going. It lets people ask questions. Oh, you're a dog person. What kind of dog breeds do you typically like if it's not a marsupial pet? It opens up the ability for them to ask questions about what kind of dog you have. Have you ever owned a dog? They could tell you if they're a dog person. Or maybe they can say, oh, I hate dogs. And you go, oh, you hate dogs? What happened? Like, oh, I can't tell whether when the dog's barking, if it's going to bite me or be my friend. So it just freaks me out. So I don't hang out with them. So I don't play with dogs. But oh, man, that's crazy, right? But now, because I have this story that I created that is either generally accepted, kind of geeky, and creates footholds for people to ask me questions, I now make it so easy to talk to me. And you can move around different social circles and keep bringing it up. So you want to think about now I encourage you not to talk about politics or religion, just because that's usually not the best way to start a conversation. Like if you're like, oh man, can you believe this president? But you don't realize that the person underneath their dress shirt has a shirt that says "Make America Great Again," or whatever country you're listening to this in, just whatever's the opposite of your viewpoints. If you bring that up in some way, you may think everyone thinks the way you think, but then you meet someone who doesn't, and you could actually ruin a relationship with someone who, even though they may have different political views, could actually be just a great person. So stay away from politics and religion and that kind of stuff. It's just always a good choice. Sports is good. Maybe if you're doing something cool or interesting and you can kind of tell a story like, yeah, so the sugar glider is crazy. I was at this fair and there was this park and it was like, do you want to own a kangaroo? And I'm like, how are they going to tell people they can own a kangaroo? This is crazy. And I got close and they said, no, not a real kangaroo, a pocket kangaroo. So you can open up the story about how you learned about it and why you think it's cool and why you're so interested in it. Or you can be like, yo, I know this is crazy and a little geeky, but I just got into fidget spinners. They go, fidget spinners? You talking about, yeah, man, it's crazy. So I got a little son and we were at the gas station. They were selling these fidget spinners, which is basically this thing. I seen them everywhere. People just spin them. And I was like, this is the stupidest thing in the world until I picked one up and I spun it. And I was like, this is actually pretty cool. Now I got one, my son's got one. And what's crazy about it is it like just keeps spinning. And I know this is so geeky, but I actually got pretty excited about it. Now, as long as you premise it or you end it with, I know it's a little geeky, or I know I'm nerding out right now, or I'm geeking out right now, you can talk about like a fidget spinner and not be a weirdo. So I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to come up with a story that you can tell to people in the answer of how you're doing that gives people a natural place to ask you questions. That's going to make you extremely likable and make social conversations way easier, because typically if you're excited about it, as long as you say, I acknowledge this little geeky or nerdy, most people are like, no, it's not. I'm actually interested in the same thing, or I'm interested in something completely different. And then you can flow with the conversation with like Aikido-like status, okay? So I want you to come up with that for yourself. I want you to implement it. Come up with a story you can use in social situations that's either evergreen, that's always true about you, or that's true about you right now. And you can use it whenever you want, and it's going to be awesome. But remember, the implementation of this information is what matters, not just hearing it. So I want you to actually take the time, come up with the story, and use it. And you're going to find yourself being a socially affluent rock star the next place you go. All right, I'm out of here, y'all. Sending you a big old high five. You are awesome. Psh.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast, The Art of Likeability, and reach out with any questions you have. Until next time, remember, my friend, you are awesome.